welcome to a new episode of the brand called You. We've brought lots of very interesting people, and today I have a good friend, someone who's made a major name for himself in the areas that he's in, Ashish Gupta. Ashish, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Ashish is from IIT Delhi, he's from Carnegie Mellon, Harvard Business School. He worked for McKinsey, eValueServe, was involved with Ashoka University, continues to be there, and is one of the founders of Plaksha University. Ashish, you've had an education and a career everyone would be jealous of. What an amazing story you've had in such a short period of time. Talk to us about your early professional life.
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this episode. It's really an honor to be here. As far as my career is concerned, I would say it's just been a blessing. I guess the middle class grounding, which is value based, is a lot of us have had, is what really drove somewhat of the success. I think my earlier years, first of all, I think I personally still believe that getting into IIT was a major achievement.
Correct.
And then after that, having the ability to go and do an MBA in the US at that point in time was another blessing in disguise, I would say. Although at that point in time I had got through IIM Ahmedabad, but I still decided to take more risk. So in the earlier years, I felt, now that I look back upon those years, that I have always tried to do things differently. And that is what has seemingly made it work out for me. So, who would let go of IIM Ahmedabad and go to the US and spend a lot of money in doing the MBA? I did that. After having worked for a year in the US, I decided to come back to India without a job. Again, at least in those times, it was kind of unheard of. And this I'm talking
Unusual for someone to come back from the US.
Right. This is at the time around the mid 90s. So at that point in time, especially, very few people, if at all, used to come back from the US. And I came back without a job. Right. But the whole point is, a lot of my friends on a lighter note said that you're making the biggest mistake of your life. And I told them that, look, after 10 years, all of you would be calling me up and say that we want a job in India, can you help us? And that's exactly how it happened. And after I came back to India, it took me a bit of time, about 4 to 5 months. But then finally, again, I got lucky and I got into McKinsey. So this was towards the end of 1995.
Okay.
So those were the early years.
And then how many years were you with McKinsey?
I was there for about 4.5 years, roughly, from till early 2000.
And then you moved to eValueServe.
I mean, first of all, the journey at McKinsey was just fantastic. It is such a wonderful place. It's a great institution, and it really prepares you for substantive career achievements in life to the extent you utilize the experiences well. So I must thank my former employer for having provided me with that opportunity. But however, during the journey at McKinsey, I realized that, inside myself, there was a different identity. My working identity was a bit different, and there was always this dissatisfaction somewhere lurking around inside me. And finally, in early 2000, when my older son was born, that sort of catalyzed me into thinking that I should move on and really do something of my own. So after having left McKinsey in the year early 2000, I actually set up a .com.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was called tiestofamily.com, along with a friend from McKinsey only. And spent about a year doing that. But then that was a major disaster that happened. However, it was a great learning experience. From 50,000 feet level of blue sky consulting down to real business, real world, trying to set up a company and trying to become an entrepreneur. So that was a major learning experience.
Correct. And then start the eValueServe.
I was just being honest to myself. I was just listening to my inner voice, and that's around the time in early 2001 that I, you know, started getting engaged at eValueServe.
So, you have done a lot of work in knowledge process outsourcing. I think you were mentioning that you were one of the first few people who probably introduced KPO to this country. For our listeners, what is KPO?
If you look at the outsourcing or the services industry globally, and especially in India, the trend started in the 70s, let's say, with the IT services, which got accelerated in the 80s and the 90s, and definitely in the 21st century. And somewhere around the late 80s and the early 90s, this whole concept of IT enabled services and later on so called BPO services got birth. And of course, then we had a lot of companies scale up call center operations and back office operations. Towards the end of the 90s, we at McKinsey had done this report for NASSCOM, in which we had also said that in addition to IT services and sort of the IT enabled services on the BPO side, there would be a trend towards more and more higher end, value added, knowledge based analytical services which will start taking shape. That is the thought process which actually led to the creation of eValueServe in the first place. And on the birth of the term KPO, there's an interesting anecdote. So one of the blue chip major investors, a VC from the Silicon Valley, had come to visit us, and we were just like a year, 2 years into the journey at eValueServe, and we were probably about 100 people at that point in time. And this gentleman sort of asked me that, are you guys doing something wrong that over a 2 year time frame you're just 100 people? You look at BPO companies, they have scaled up to thousands of people in this time frame. So aren't you a BPO? So obviously I was at a spot or driven into a corner at that point in time. So that's when I spontaneously just came out. No, we are all about high-end knowledge processes, and we are kind of a KPO, knowledge process outsourcing.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what led to the birth of the term itself. But really, if you look at it from a more fundamental basis, because of the connectivity in the world, geography is history. As they say, right? So you can pretty much work on any kind of a process, any kind of an analytical exercise from any part of the world. So that was the business model that got created at that point in time.
Okay. And you have somehow or the other been a lot involved in education. You were involved with Ashoka. And we're going to talk about a little bit of Ashoka, about your new university, Plaksha. You spoke about Liberal Arts Association with Ashoka, the Science, Technology, Engineering and Maths, the STEM with Plaksha. How did you develop such an interest in education?
So Ashutosh, what happened in around the 2006 and 7 time frame is that I would say I went through a 40% life crisis and not a midlife crisis.
Okay.
Because I was 35, 36 that time. And that crisis was more of a situation where one saw and a lot of let's say pain in the world, pain in your society, pain in your own families, and at the same time, completely on a different dimension, I was also at the sort of the peak of my professional achievements. So Prime Minister Manmohan Singh at that point in time gave me a Best Innovator Award.
Wow.
I used to be in interviews, and there was some amount of name and fame which came, and of course I was doing quite well at eValueServe also. Somehow there was this 18 months to 2 years of a confused time frame, in which a lot of the things in the world started essentially being meaningless. And that's when a mentor and a close friend sort of advised me that you'll find your answers in the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
So at that point in time is when I started reading the Bhagavad Gita, trying to understand it. And that's when I think the spiritual journey, in some sense, began. And I'm far, far away from having reached a level of self-realization which one needs to reach at, but still that journey is on. So at that time when I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, and sorry for the long answer,
No,
but
no,
I think it's very
absolutely,
important to
Absolutely.
understand the background of
Correct.
why Ashoka, why Plaksha,
Yeah.
why education.
And also Benori we'll talk about.
Yes, yes. So essentially, my biggest learning so till date is that you need to have a higher purpose which is beyond yourself. You know, and it's only us human beings who can have that kind of a purpose. So that's when I thought that I need to do something which is in the form of give back, which is in the form of channelizing the compassion that one has, and at the same time is something which will be great for our country. You know, one of the reasons why I came back also is been quite patriotic, if you will, and I do want to do whatever I can to give my own contribution towards our great country.
Fantastic.
So that is what led to the birth of Ashoka. Is
Yeah.
that education can be the biggest force multiplier for any economy.
And you've been associated with Ashoka since 2008. The question I wanted to ask you was that what have you done so well in Ashoka that it has become one of the most sought after liberal arts school of India in such a short period of time?
Well, first of all, I must put it on the record that my own contribution is little, whether it's money or time. And you know, what happened was that in early 2008, about 6 of us got together, and you know, the whole idea behind creating the university was a philanthropic thought process, right? And all of us are passionately driven by our country and this notion of unleashing the potential. So I think the intent itself was the driving force, and the project was the university, the institution was always bigger than any individual concerned, and since it was not for profit in nature, we were never ever confused about strategic decisions. It was very, very clear. And an educational institution at the end of the day is nothing but good teachers and good students, right? So that is what exactly we have focused on, and we have set our bar very, very high. And to that extent, I think the founding team in the initial years was quite visionary from that perspective. And we, I think, took a lot of risk. We were bold and courageous, and there was a maniacal focus on execution.
Amazing. Amazing. And then that led you on to work on Plaksha. Now, first help me understand the meaning of Plaksha, and then tell us a little bit about your plans for this technology university.
Yeah, so actually, Plaksha is the mythical tree from which the river Saraswati is supposed to originate.
Okay.
It is also supposedly the tree from which, under which Buddha received enlightenment.
Okay.
All right. So the idea here is to say that this is the place where you learn.
Okay.
Right. And actually, some of us in the 2008 time frame wanted to set up another IIT or a Stanford. But as things panned out, that became into another wonderful university called Ashoka. So that dream of ours, and especially mine, still persisted, that we should set up something more in the STEM area. And in 2015, I got an opportunity to start thinking about that university again. So our foundation here is called Reimagining Higher Education Foundation.
Okay.
And the idea is not to create another great technology or engineering university, or the so-called 21st century university.
Yeah.
But the idea is to think of Plaksha as a movement. Think of reimagining science and technology and engineering, math, entrepreneurship, and also the liberal arts or the social sciences education in the world.
Okay.
So such a institution, and it has four building blocks. One is of course technology, second is social sciences, third is entrepreneurship, and the fourth is self and leadership and leading from within.
Okay.
So those are the four pillars. To the best of our understanding and knowledge, such an institution does not exist.
Sure. Sure.
So we will be launching the campus in 2021,
Okay.
and it's coming up in Mohali.
Okay. Well, given your track record with Ashoka, I'm sure Plaksha will be a big, big success, and good luck.
Thank you.
So Ashish, now moving on to your new passion, which is Benori. You've set this up again to be able to disseminate knowledge in the form of analytics. But tell us a little bit about the whole concept of Benori and what are you doing there?
Right. So Benori Knowledge is a company started by my wife Pooja and myself. So we were classmates at IIT, and actually we had thought that if life is kind to us, and at some point in time we will create a company called Benori. And again, as
Tell
I
us what it
mentioned in the
means.
beginning, I really feel blessed that whatever one dreams of sort of happens. So Benori, see, the whole idea here is that the knowledge services space and the knowledge process outsourcing industry as such, the knowledge solutions industry as we call it these days, is undergoing fundamental changes. And on one side, you do have technology developments, which in my mind have been only partially leveraged to optimize the knowledge processes, right? So one of the pillars of our strategy, and we have implemented only a little bit so far, but over the next 5-10 years, this is something we'll definitely do, is to adopt technology. The second thing is that lots of companies on the planet, and especially in India, are stuck inside this iron triangle of cost, quality, and access
Correct.
to information, intelligence, and insights.
Yeah.
And because of that, they are just not able to realize their own potential. And because they are not able to grow as much as they can, we don't have enough job creation happening in the country.
Yeah.
So going back to my point of purpose, this is in some ways also a give back to the country, especially for our India-based clients, is that we want to add so much of value-added knowledge and insights to our client organizations in India, especially, such that they grow far more than they would have grown otherwise. And ultimately over the next 15-20 years, I hope and wish that we are able to enable 20 million jobs in the country.
But I was reading about Benori, and you say that one of your objectives is to reduce the cost of knowledge and enable companies. How will this happen? Will you just give it away cheap? Or
Yeah, see, that's where the entrepreneurial mindset needs to come in, right?
Correct.
And the fact of the matter is that traditional professional services firms do have a tendency to charge a lot, and maybe for good reasons.
Yeah.
But many of them probably do not add proportional value. So just the profit margins which are being made in the industry need to come down. Second is the use of technology. One has to use more technology, whether it's automation, whether it's NLP or AI, machine learning, or web scraping tools, whatever it is. there are apps out there, there are APIs out there which one can use to make the process more efficient. And at the end of the day, if your intent, again going back to the Ashoka intent, if the intent is to add value to your clients, is that they can meet their potential, the true client servicing aspect of it. I'm sure as entrepreneurs, we will work around the client's budgets.
Okay.
So, so really, I fundamentally believe that the cost of knowledge on the planet can be brought down and should be brought down.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So let me move on to the next segment. I mean, you've done startups. You mentioned just now that, you had one failed startup which gave you a lot of learnings. Um, you also probably invest in a lot of startups, as an angel investor. Um, what are some of the basic mistakes startup entrepreneurs make?
Yeah, well, there are different mistakes different people
Sure.
make, but let me try and capture some of the main ones. I think the first biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make, which invariably leads to a failed startup, is that their intent of doing the startup is sort of a bit lopsided. So let me give you an example. In the year 2017, I personally met 600 startups because I was trying to create an accelerator here in Gurgaon. And as part of that, 2,000 startups applied to me, to Benori Ventures, and I personally met about 600. The first question I used to ask anybody who came to meet me was, why are you trying to do this? Or what's your intent behind doing this? And I was in some sense shocked. Maybe I should not have been, but that was the response. They said that I want to create wealth.
Okay, that's an unusual.
Right? About 60-70% people would say
Yes.
I want to create wealth. Now, don't get me wrong. There's
No.
absolutely wealth creation is a integral part of any economy,
I
an
agree.
integral part of anybody's own personal aspirations. But especially if the only reason or one of the predominant reasons to start a company is that you want to create wealth,
Yeah.
then there is a likelihood that you will fail.
Yeah, you slide downhill.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that is the first mistake that I have seen a lot of people make when they think of starting companies, is that for them creating wealth is a disproportionately higher sort of intent
Yeah.
statement, right? The second mistake that I have seen people make is that they are, and especially media reports so many successes and so on and so forth. What people don't realize is that behind every success, there are probably 999 failures.
Correct.
Or even more.
Absolutely.
So people do not understand the success failure ratio when they are starting a company. Third mistake, which I've seen is leads to, I was reading some analysis, maybe 53% of startups fail because they choose the wrong investor, right? That's the third mistake. The fourth is that people are, again, you can't generalize it, but it takes time to build a business, right? And that was my biggest learning at Ties to Family as well, my failed.com, that you need to essentially be in this for the long haul.
Correct.
You need to be thinking profits
Correct.
and not valuation only.
Correct.
The moment you start, you move your focus away from profits to valuation, you will end up being that one person out of a million or a 10,000 or 100,000 who would actually create real value.
Very well said. Very well said. So next question relating to startups. I mean, just continuing with your own comment that 999 out of 1,000 may fail or 9 out of 10 may fail. I've seen that barring a few entrepreneurs who actually fail, most of them take it very personally, and that's started to affect, and we've had some fairly celebrated cases of people taking the extreme step. How relevant is the need to be able to explain failure to a lot of startups, more so in an Indian context, where we've always been told how critical success is uh, for our own psyche.
Right, right, right. I think this is not only true for startup entrepreneurs. This is, I think, true for everybody in life.
Correct.
And as you mentioned, especially in India, a lot of us tend to take it personally. My submission, and I've mentored literally thousands of entrepreneurs and students at Ashoka over the years.
Correct.
My submission has always been that as long as you've tried your best, frankly, that is the only thing in your control. I mean, Gita talks about it. Only as long as you can have, you have given it your best shot.
Correct.
You don't settle.
Correct.
You just keep on trying, keep on trying. You're persistent. You're passionate about what you're doing. Leave everything else to the, universal law of cause and effect.
Yeah.
However, the failure is not in a failed startup. The failure is if you haven't tried your best. That is the failure.
Absolutely.
Right? And oftentimes, and especially in India, we do tend to be too harsh on ourselves. Right? And that's where I think it's very, very important to be able to have a mentor or somebody who you can bounce off your stresses, and especially in the life of a startup founder. I mean, you have called it
it's a lonely job.
The entrepreneurial depression, I think,
Yeah.
right? I think it's very, very lonely. By the way, it's very lonely in corporations as well.
That's
When you're at the top,
That
it's
is
very lonely at the top.
That is so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. And yet, nobody from the startup ecosystem is there to hold hands of a startup entrepreneur who is struggling. Because I have seen that when a failure happens, first that individual is trying to cope with the loss. Second, uh, their families and their other people are struggling to cope with the loss. Third, the creditors are out there to sue them and recover their money. And fourth, our precious fourth estate. And if you're a prominent startup, they really go after you. So it's a quadruple whammy that a failed entrepreneur goes through.
Right. No, I agree. However, I think there is also this notion. A lot of failed entrepreneurs actually have very, very big egos, so they don't ask for help. Whereas the fact of the matter is, half an hour or 1 hour with a person like you or somebody, who has seen both sides of the equation, in their journeys. If you just have a half an hour conversation with somebody like that, they can really calm you down, and they can see you. They can get you to see things in the right perspective. So I would actually urge everybody that and not only startup
Get a mentor.
entrepreneur people who have failed in their startups, but generally when you're going through a stress in life, when you're failing at stuff, reach out.
Correct. That's so well said.
Yeah,
That's so well said.
and people are willing to help.
Oh, absolutely.
Generally, people are
Yeah,
good people, so they're willing to help.
I agree. Completely agree.
Yeah.
First, moving to the last few questions. I want to ask you, when was the last time you did something for the first time? I mean, you've had such an amazing career, and as you say, you've been blessed to have virtually been successful at most things you have done. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
On a lighter note, right now,
Okay.
I've never done a podcast kind of a thing before.
Okay,
So
wonderful.
right now,
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm doing it. But on a more serious note, last year when Pooja, my wife, and I started working in a company together, this was the first time we were working together.
Okay.
And so that was the thing. And normally, I do like experimenting. Normally I do like to try new things. So I'm sure I can come up with many other examples in the recent past when I've done something for the first time.
I'm sure. Okay, my last question to you. Is there any advice you want to give to the thousands of young startups and entrepreneurs who keep listening to our podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I can say a few things here. The first thing is I would like to quote Steve Jobs. His famous quote is that simplification is the ultimate sophistication. Try and simplify your business models. It's better to dominate a small niche and then expand from there than to try and, in your own mind, have this perception of how many different things we are doing, and that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Simplify, simplify, simplify. Look at the Facebook business model. It's actually a very simple business model.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most valued companies on the planet. So complex, it's very difficult to simplify things. It's very easy to complicate things. So reduce complexity.
Okay.
Second, fundraising. Choice of investor is critical, and you should raise money when you don't need it.
Okay.
Do not try and think of raising money when you are in a deep hole, because then you would either give away too much equity, or you would just not be able to raise money. And third, just keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. Do not relent. Just keep at it.
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Wow. Ashish, thank you very much. I think your words of wisdom will be heard and appreciated by many, many people. And I'm grateful that you have come. Wish you all success with Plaksha, with Benori, and in life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You podcast. Be sure to visit tbcy.in to join the conversation, access show notes, and discover fantastic bonus content. You can follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Simply search for The Brand Called You. Thank you, and see you next week.